A very good morning to you all, your respective dignitaries of the day, fathers and my dear brothers, and a warm welcome to the after seminar themed Discovering Self, Multidimensional Perspectives, organized by the Departmental Philosophy, Loyola College, Satya Nilayam. Faith is to believe what you do not see. The reward of this faith is to see what you believe. Let us begin our Departmental Seminar by invoking the Lord. I request the Satya Nilayam choir to lead us into prayer.
You are the fullness. There is fullness. Here is fullness. From the fullness is derived. Though the fullness is derived from the fullness, still the fullness remains. My dear friends, the meaning of this ancient Purna mantra is that the whole creation constitutes one unit. Each and every particle, non-living or living, represents the same unit. There is no place where this whole unit is not present. This whole reproduces itself in its own image. Removing every entity from this unit has no effect on it, because that which remains represents the same whole. Let us close our eyes in silence as we ask the graces from our Lord. Almighty God, loving Father and Mother, you have created each one of us in your own image and likeness. We are incomplete without you. Give us the grace that we are able to reflect deep down on who we are, what is our purpose in life, and what we are called to do. May your divine intervention help us to look into our very being. Help us to become aware that it is you, Lord, who abides in us, and your presence in us makes us whole. Our lives experience fullness through you and you alone. Come, O Lord, and fill the voids that we have created through our selfish desires. And may your coming bring a sense of belonging to our own being and towards others. May our hearts and minds be filled with your love, which will help us to realize that it is you who are our source and strength. We ask this prayer in your most holy name. Amen.
Thank you, Satya Nilayam. Dear friends, the universe doesn't give you what you ask for with your thoughts. It gives you what you demand with your actions, says Steve Maraboli. That is indeed a way of discovering self. To begin with, I now request our dignitaries to come to the desk. Our chief guest, Reverend Father Dr. Thomas Amritam, Principal of Loyola College, Chennai. Reverend Father Dr. Francis Xavier, Rector of Loyola College, Chennai. Reverend Father Dr. Boniface Pana, Rector of Satya Nilayam. Reverend Father Dr. Lawrence Fernandez, Dean of the Faculty of Philosophy. And Reverend Father Dr. Jagadish, Assistant Professor and the convener of today's seminar, to come over to the desk. Thank you, dear dignitaries. I cordially invite Father Lawrence Fernandez to formally welcome again.
Good morning to you all.
Good morning.
It is wonderful that we have gathered here this morning for this departmental seminar on the theme Discovering Self, Multidimensional Perspectives. It is a matter of great joy that we could have this seminar in both the modes, online and on campus. All the staff, the students, the speakers of the day are present here in the campus for this seminar, and we all have made a provision to be connected to all our scholars, professors, well-wishers, student friends and others to be connected online. So I'm happy to welcome you all for this seminar. Welcome to you, dear Father Dr. Francis Xavier, Rector of Loyola College, Chennai, and he is the one who is going to deliver the keynote address this morning. Father Dr. Francis is an erudite reader, prolific writer, able administrator, and one of the founding fathers of the Department of Philosophy. You must know that when we began the process of beginning this department, it is Father Francis who came to us along with Father Ignatius, the then principal, and with a lot of discussion. Therefore, we are deeply grateful for Father Francis for being part of the beginning process and after continuing to support our ventures. One more good news is Jubilee year, 50 years as a Jesuit. We will celebrate it some 2 days later. So we want to express our deep gratitude for your presence, Father Francis, and most welcome to you here. We are delighted to welcome Reverend Dr. Thomas, the chief guest, who is the principal of Loyola College, who has been a pillar of strength to our department and also a friend of us in our mission to serve. Thank you so much, dear Father Thomas, for your presence and encouragement in our academic endeavors. Glad to have you here present for the seminar. Hearty welcome. Welcome, dear Father Boniface Pana, Rector of Sacred Heart College, Satya Nilayam. At the head of this institute, you have always shown keen interest in academic endeavors and always have found great support in you. Most welcome, Father Boniface. Our Father Registrar, the Francis D'Souza, has taken the responsibility in this academic year as Registrar and Controller of Examinations. In a short time, he has endeared himself to all the staff and students and has been very efficiently carried out his task with much interest and great efficiency. Hearty welcome to you, Father Francis. A very warm welcome to you, dear staff and students of the Department of Philosophy and Sacred Heart College, Satya Nilayam. It is wonderful to have you here, participate in this seminar. We are glad to have you. Most welcome. Hearty welcome to you all. And we all, our online friends, professors, scholars, invitees, well-wishers, happy to have you connected with us and participating in this seminar. So once again, a very warm welcome to each one of you. Welcome.
A good head and a good heart are always a soothing combination for a philosopher, and such a person is Father Lawrence. Thank you, Father Lawrence, for your words of welcome, and a hearty welcome to you too. We now have Reverend Father Dr. Jagdish, Assistant Professor and the convener of the seminar today, sharing with us the dynamics of the seminar.
The self itself, the understanding, is very, very diverse. It is not one and any. Now it goes into the philosophy that what are the diversities and how we understand the self. The Department of Philosophy, of course, we need to have these understandings coming together. That's why the seminar named as Discovering Self, Multidimensional Perspectives. Understanding the human person is a crucial topic in philosophy. When you say the three beliefs, philosophy of God, philosophy of the world, philosophy of human person, of course the crucial pivotal point is human. When we understand the human being, this is where it comes boils down to that is the self. It looks that the subject, that is self, is as old as philosophy itself, or the beginning of human thinking, what we call philosophy. At the same time, the subject is ever new with the different perspectives arising at each epoch of human history. When one looks at the human person, it involves many divisions constituting a person. The divisions take different meanings at a given era and according to a particular dimension. Self is one such term that has been various by various disciplines. Now this is what we call a small introduction. From this above reflection, the human person and self, the concept of discovering self emerges. Many questions arise as to what exactly the term self means. It is not the same at all. There are multiple disciplines, each defining what self means. The seminar is directed towards understanding self from these multidimensional perspectives. At present, the situation looks like a beginning of a new era with a popular slogan, New Normal. The understanding of the self takes a definite turn in the contemporary situation. This seminar aims at understanding the self from the different dimensions of disciplines and understanding their relevance to the present time. I welcome you to this seminar so that you may go with rich experiences of understanding not only the objective self, but the subjective self as understanding myself. Thank you and have a good night.
Thank you, Father Jagdish, for giving us an idea of what we need to look forward to today's seminar. Thank you. Dear friends, we are very happy to have here now Dr. Chandrasekhar, Associate Professor at Departmental College. I request Dr. Chandrasekhar to come forward. The best and the most beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or even touched. They must be felt with the heart. The most authentic moment is here. May I now invite chief guest, Reverend Father Dr. Thomas Mandela, Principal of Loyola College, Chennai, to deliver inaugural address. Over to you, Father.
Good morning, friends. The dear Reverend Father Boniface Madal, Rector of Satya Nilayam, Reverend Father Francis P. Xavier, Rector of Loyola College, and Reverend Father Lawrence Fernandez, Head, the Department of Philosophy, Satya Nilayam, and Reverend Father Jagdish Parab, the convener of the seminar, and also the brain behind this day event. My dear learned colleagues and Professor Chandrasekhar from Loyola College, and my dear brothers, I'm very happy to be here, and I take this opportunity to really thank you for inviting me. Because Father Lawrence has been inviting me for a pretty long time. Finally, we fixed a date and time, but I think Corona once again disrupted our meeting here. And thank God, Jagdish gave me this opportunity to come and be with you. And Lawrence tells me I have one more opportunity to be with you. Maybe the time will interaction part of it. This, I'm very happy to be part of this inaugural session. I'd like to thank Jagdish for inviting me to Satya Nilayam, and I'm very happy to be with you all this conference. First of all, let me thank the academic team for complementing the regular teaching learning here, along with this type of conferences and seminars. I think Departmental Seminar, other international conferences, they add a great value to our formation, our thought process here. Even in Loyola College, apart from our regular teaching learning process, these seminars pave the way for really enhancing the learning process. Because these conferences and seminars bring diverse thought process and worldviews and really complement what we learn in the classroom. In the classroom, we are confined by our syllabus. Obviously, the reflection, the learning revolves around the syllabus. But these conferences obviously go beyond, cross boundaries, and enhance our learning process. That way, I'm very happy that this conference is titled as Multidimensional Perspectives. I think Jagdish gave a good concept note as an introductory concept note on understanding self with a diverse perspective. So that is why I'm very happy this is taking place. And I also see a great relevance. Although, as a student of sociology, I beg to differ because we believe, I'm sure Lawrence will agree with me, self is a socially, culturally constructed reality. It evolves. When a child is born, there's a biological organism. But as it grows, society, culture, language, and social relationship determine who you are, what you are, how you become. So, I have a little hesitation in terming it as discovery. Discovery means something is there that you are going to unearth, unmask, uncover. And self is not a complete object or a reality that you discover. So as we grow, it evolves. However, having said that, I see great relevance in this topic because today, once again, looking at a different perspective, self is buried under various categories. It can be a social category like our gender, or biological category like our gender, social categories like caste, religion, language, ethnicity, all these various aspects obviously blur oneself. And today, most of the problems that we encounter in our society, be it religious fundamentalism or communal tension or ethnic rivalry, language conflict, all these happen because we tend to isolate or identify ourselves with religion, language, race, caste. Otherwise, this conflict tension will not prevail in today's context. What we see in Karnataka, or what you see in any other part of India, it's absolutely looks shocking to see why are people so inimical to each other. Why should there be so much hatred among our own fellow beings? Because we identify ourselves so much with our own religion and caste. Language. So that way I see there is something very, very specific about this conference discovery, so that going deep down we are able to discover our true self. True self that will reveal to us what is uniting us, what is common to us, what is connecting the dots within us. Now, beyond our language, our race and ethnicity, our caste and religion, it's something common among all of us. I hope this day of reflection helps us to uncover all these aspects and then begin to cherish what is common to all of us. Then I'm very happy and really appreciate Jagdish for bringing this multidimensional perspective so that our understanding gets deepened and we are really able to see the inner core of each of us. I'm sure as the brothers are preparing ourselves for a larger ministry, this enlightened reflection process sure will bring about huge enlightenment. Your own understanding of philosophy or reading of philosophy will get enriched by this reflection process. From that point of view, I'd like to wish the organizer as well as the entire, all the speakers, all the best so that your reflection really goes deep and it's able to really bring all of us together so that we are able to move ahead with something that is very uniting all of us, connecting all of us. Through that we are able to bring about not only social transformation but also self-transformation. So with these few words of my own sharing on the topic, I would like to really wish you all the best and have a wonderful day. Once again, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Have a great day.
Thank you very much, Father Thomas, for your inspiring words. I now invite Reverend Father Dr. Manifest Panna, Rector of Satya Nilayam, to address the gathering.
Dr. Thomas Amritam, Principal, Loyola College, and our chief guest today, Reverend Dr. Francis Xavier, Rector, Loyola College, and our keynote speaker today, Reverend Dr. Lawrence Fernandez, Head of the Department of Philosophy, Loyola College, Reverend Dr. Jagdish, convener of the seminar, and three paper presenters, Dr. V. Chandrasekhar, Vivekananda College, Reverend Father Martin, Reverend Father Prudency, all staff members, Department of Philosophy, and Satya Nilayam Sacred Heart College. Dear students, Department of Philosophy, and all the online participants. Departmental Seminar is a regular feature of our academic curriculum. Amidst uncertain situations, I am glad that this seminar is being materialized in this mode. I am happy that Dr. Thomas Amitam and Dr. Francis Xavier had graced this occasion. I am grateful to them for their support and encouragement. Dr. Lawrence and Dr. Jagadish. Dr. Lawrence as HOD and Dr. Jagadish as convener have planned this seminar meticulously. Our three paper presenters have generously responded to the request. I am grateful to them. Besides, the students' body has played a role in organizing this seminar. My best wishes to all organizers, keynote speakers, paper presenters, online and offline participants. All the success have a philosophically engaging and enriching day. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the manifest, for those wishes. Dear all, we have now come to the end of the inaugural session. We now have the keynote address, before which we request all the dignitaries to occupy the seats on the other side. And also, before they move, I request scholastics Paul, Udara and Joshua to present the bouquet to our three guests. We have with us Reverend Father Dr. Francis Xavier, Rector of Loyola College, Chennai. A dynamic personality, well known for his inventing the 25th hour concept and practice through time management, highly intellectual person and scholar, man of the poor, and a loved Jesuit. Father, we are indeed very happy to have you with us here today, and now this time is yours. I take this privilege to invite you to address this gathering. Over to you, Father.
Good morning to you all. Reverend Father Manifest Director, Reverend Father Thomas, Principal of Loyola College, Reverend Father Lawrence, Head of the Department of Philosophy, Father Jagadish, the convener, and all the speakers, professors, and my dear fellow Jesuits. Thank you for inviting me, and I would like to share my views on discovering self, the scientific perspective. The thread of thought in my sharing would be comprehension, consciousness, and communication. Science is about observation, measurement, and interpretation about how the reality functions. In science, subjective observations are interpreted based on objective measurements for all to understand. Further, science continues to provide more and more intuition that often lead to religious enlightenment. Science believes that the self does exist. The experience of having a self is expressed through the feelings of pain and of pleasure, of control, intentionality and agency, of self-governance, of acting according to one's beliefs and desires, a sense of engaging with the physical world and the social world. All these offer scientific evidence of the existence of the self. The scientific self implies skills, competencies, qualities, or disposition one acquires in one's life. And the scientific perspective of self develops through two streams. One, physical or biological sciences leading to human development, and two, social sciences with a focus on interactions, relationships, and communication. Science perceives and understands the self as an integrated growth process of awareness tending to fullness. It's an understanding as potential becoming actual reality through critical thinking leading to social consciousness. Non-physical consciousness might understand the self as creator designed to be the essence of human beings and perhaps the other beings as well, using the non-physical substance of soul or spirit. We can understand that science in general perceives the self as the potential to comprehend the reality and the impulse to communicate for integral unification and fullness of the universe. Self as comprehension. The self can be viewed mainly under three phases, namely physical, mental, and spiritual. There will be many intermediate phases as well if one wants to go in detail. One, physical life. In the science of evolution, the theory of evolution has several variants. Darwin's is the most scientifically established one. Darwin's theory that all species of life have descended from common ancestors is now widely accepted and considered as a fundamental concept in science. Evolution is considered as development of complexity of nervous system. This might imply that we might possess something in common along with something specific acquired down the process chain of evolution. 2. Mental life is the outcome of physical evolution, and this stage consists of ego, superego, according to Sigmund Freud. The ego and superego are a set of three concepts in psychoanalytic theory describing distinct interacting agents in the psychic apparatus. The three agents are theoretical constructs that describe the activities and interactions of the mental life of a person. And 3, spiritual life, according to Dept, is the culmination of the process of evolution. Physical evolution becomes intellectual evolution. This was termed as noosphere, dominated by consciousness, the mind, and interpersonal relationships. Dept considered the technological and scientific advancements as byproducts of this phase. Then comes in the spiritual evolution, where the entire process converges and merges into the omega point. Finally, the process of material elements evolving into physical entity, moving up the ladder of evolution as intellectual and finally spiritual plane, is actually completing the ascent ascending spiral of consciousness. When the material element becomes evolved as physical entity, there comes in sensation. When physical moved into mental state, there was thinking and emotions. And when finally spiritual state dawned, there came in consciousness. The self or specificity was dormant in elements. It became sentient feeling on the physical level as individual entity and then the society. And finally, it grew into conscious of the universe. It might be difficult to demarcate the borderline or transition from material to immaterial, the non-living to the living beings. The comprehension with ascending intensity has the phase of inter, and trans-comprehension. Comprehension of the self begins as monad, whether according to the philosophy of Leibniz as an indivisible and hence ultimately simple entity such as an atom or a person, or a single celled organism, especially a flagellate protogeny. Here, the intra-comprehension is perceived as dormant. Then, as nervous system become more and more complex in the evolution process, intercomprehension comes in, extending from oneself to other similar or different entities or species. This state ushers in trans-comprehension in realizing the material becoming intellectual, spiritual, or a power beyond in that order. In the Einsteinian equation E is equal to mc square, matter is presented as equivalent to energy. David Bohm, an American British scientist, argues that reality is tripartite, namely matter and mass, energy and consciousness. He would state, I quote, consciousness is a coherent whole which is never static or complete, but which is an unending process of movement and unfoldment. End of the quote. Energy could be understood as physical, mental, spiritual, extending to divine, that is, divine energy as grace. The final comprehension is converging in or merging with the divine as the end station of reality known as the Omega point, where the evolution of material ascends into physical, intellectual, spiritual, and divine reality. Hawking and Lodinow propose in their book The Grand Design that there is an intelligent or grand design that keeps the universe going, but there is no discussion about who the grand designer might be. Now, self as consciousness. The initial evolution process, namely thinking and feeling, brings in the onset of intelligence as reflexive knowledge, manifesting as comprehension. We might have noticed that it takes longer for the heart to accept what the head already knows. From knowing flows feeling. Comprehension ascends into consciousness that grows out of and transcends perception, thoughts, feelings, maturing as awareness. Consciousness at its simplest is sentience or awareness of internal and external existence. For Bohm, consciousness involves awareness, attention, perception, acts of understanding, and perhaps yet more. Freud proposed 3 levels of awareness, namely the conscious, pre-conscious, and unconscious. These three levels correspond to or overlap with these ideas of ego and superego. The conscious level comprises all we are aware about ourselves and our surroundings. The pre-conscious are memories which could be retrieved from the past experience, and the unconscious is an area outside of conscious awareness which are stored out of our awareness but could nevertheless influence our behavior. The conscious level is considered to have 7 states, starting with first individual focused, then universal oriented, and finally dissolving into the ultimate consciousness. These states are waking consciousness, deep sleep, dreaming, transcendental consciousness, cosmic consciousness, God consciousness, and unity consciousness. The first 3 are individual related, whether physically active or not. It is associated with functional nervous system. The next 2 transcend the individual and take on social and cosmic dimensions. And finally, it converges or merges or dissolves in deep consciousness. The mind-body could be trained to reach the universal or unity consciousness. Once again, as Bohm would put it, deep down, the consciousness of mankind is one. This evolutionary process from nervous system becoming consciousness concretizes in communication. The ultimate consciousness is that there is energy which pervades and unites everything, and this interconnectedness is realized as communication. And finally, self as communication. Knowing or comprehending oneself matures as becoming conscious of others or of other entities, culminating in communication with them. The development of senses starting from single cell to plants, animals, and humans are classified as touch, sight, hearing, smell, taste, and awareness. Communication in the brain is due to neurons as chemical energy via neurotransmitters. Some call the 6th sense or the 7th one as proprioception, which makes our brain understand where our body is in space. Proprioception, for example, enables a person to touch his or her finger to the tip of their nose, even with their eyes closed, and to climb steps without looking at each one. It is related to the development or evolution of genes. This evolutionary development not only results in growth of perception, but also communication, inter, and transcommunication. Harari, in his book Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind, narrates how human beings began to communicate, first through sound, then with signs followed by drawings, before primitive form of language emerged. This communication has gone through so much of advancement that people think that we could now even communicate with aliens from other planets. The movie E.T., the Extraterrestrial, by Spielberg, brings out, at least in imagination, the possibility of understanding aliens and the ability of aliens demonstrating their potential to learn our language. Russell narrates in their book The Sparrow how a Jesuit, after capturing a few notes from the outer space, could go to that space, contact the people who were musically talented, and build up communication with them. Recently, as you know, astronomers stumbled upon unknown space objects beaming out radio signals every 18 minutes. And the physicist Capra, in his Tower Physics, draws the parallel between the modern physics and the Eastern mysticism. According to our physics, 1. Everything is interconnected. 2. Every entity from planets to subatomic particles is ever moving and ever changing. And 3. This constant change and motion lead from temporality to permanent unity. Science of intellectual knowledge discovers self as an integral part of heart and emotion, eventually leading to self-realization or self-actualization through consciousness and communication. From comprehension, consciousness, and communication, the self begins to discover much more than self as a monad, a particle in the ocean of the cosmos. 1. The discovery of self starts from knowing oneself as originating from atoms, molecules, cells, etc. As the physical self grows, psychological and social aspects bring in medical comprehension, eventually leading to the limited comprehension to incomparable admiration of something beyond known as transcendence and divinity in religious understanding. 2. The intellectual knowledge has led to the realization that humankind was entrusted with the task to work and to take care of the earth where we live, move, and have our being as the offspring of the power that created us in His image and likeness, Imago Dei. In fact, the understanding became the consciousness of our power as we gain more and more knowledge, insight, and expertise in science and technology. Humankind has begun to exploit our common home, and our digital society has brought in a faceless world. The more communication facilities we have, the less we keep up with personal communication with each other. 3. The comprehension of self and its consciousness have brought in self-destruction. Fistenberg, in his soul-searching book, The Invisible Rainbow, explains how electricity has shaped the modern world, but at the same time how cell towers, Wi-Fi, 5G, etc. have affected our health and the environment, causing major diseases of industrialized civilization such as heart diseases, diabetes, cancer, etc., caused by electrical pollution as radiation. 4. But there is also the possibility of self-actualization. In Laudato Si, Pope Francis speaks on care for our common home. He laments environmental degradation and global warming, and calls all people of the world to take swift and unified global action to save this world and our lives as well. 5. In the process of discovering self, we see on the one hand a scientific understanding of life cycle from Big Bang to Big Crunch, which seems to be a parallel to Thomas Aquinas' exitus et reditus concept. In a natural sense, this cycle could be understood like the cycle of seasons in a year. Tender shoots in the spring becomes beautiful leaves in the summer, but when the autumn, there is the foliage and fall of leaves, giving way in the winter to denuded trees, bringing in melancholic scene to begin all over again in the next spring. The cyclic process indicates that unless leaves fall down and disappear, no new blade would appear. This temporal reality makes one understand that we are invited to recognize and grow in universal fraternity, and eventually we will merge with higher energy. The self that was dominant in elements emerges alive in birth, grows in understanding and consciousness, attains fullness in communication, and finally merges with the higher energy of power, the ultimate consciousness. And the revelation is, discovering of self from scientific perspective begins from knowledge about oneself, becomes comprehension, grows as consciousness of the universe, and expands in communication with all therein. This process transforms one from material to spiritual realm. For Hopkins, the world is charged with the grandeur of God. Francis of Assisi realizes the interrelated universe where he is conscious of brother sun, sister moon. Ignatius of Loyola understands how he discovers self from elements to divinity when he writes in the Spiritual Exercises number 235, I quote, I will consider how God dwells in creatures, in the elements, giving them existence, in the plants, giving them life, in the animals, giving them sensation, in human beings, giving them intelligence, and finally, how in this way He dwells also in myself, giving me existence, life, sensation, and intelligence, and even further, making me His temple, since I am created as the likeness and image of the Divine Majesty. End of the quote. Thus, the human being is the fullness of self, which has been evolving from the elements, plants, animals, and human beings. This evolution of discovery of self goes even beyond as universal consciousness and its ultimate convergence in the good energy or the primordial energy or the ultimate consciousness. And this divine omnipresence for Ignatius is the hub of contact and communication with all entities in the universe as he labors and works for me in all the creatures on the face of the earth, weaving a web of communication. Capra also sees a parallel between particle physics and the power beyond. He draws a parallel between Shiva's cosmic dance and the dance of subatomic particles, which are in constant motion. According to Capra, I quote, modern physics has shown that the rhythm of creation and destruction is not only manifest in the turn of the seasons and in the birth and death of all living creatures, but is also the very essence of inorganic matter. And that, for the modern physicists, then, Shiva's dance is the dance of subatomic matter. End of the quote. The human history has been an evolution of discovery. When fire was discovered, the self of the energy of youth. When electricity was discovered, the self of modernity made inroad. When digitization was discovered, the self of new age dawned, but all these discoveries have helped us discover self better, stage by stage, ever ascending in understanding, especially its potential, both positive and negative. In our days, the discovery of self is taking us more towards destruction of self. We are yet to discover self of meaning in life, individual and collective. Finding meaning in life would bring in a sense of responsibleness for the very essence of human existence towards the rest in the reality. As the pre-Indian prophecy says, when the last tree has been cut down, the last fish caught, the last river poisoned, only then will we realize that one cannot eat money. It is already late, but before it is too late, we need to discover self for goodness, fullness, and happiness in life. The self is also capable of finding creativity in a crisis. Human beings have weathered many a crisis in the past and have managed to bounce back every time. Self has that potential energy from being to becoming. As science explores the how of the reality, the self understands the why of it and strives to find fullness of meaning and integrated unity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your thought-provoking key address, dear Father Francis. We now have the first session of the day, before which may I now invite Dr. B. Chandrasekhar to come over the desk.
But beyond that, I was actually looking forward to this, but unfortunately, due to some pressures in my college, and also the control recognitions of the college, and you all know the exams are going on right now. From morning 9 o'clock, I had to go out to check if they have uploaded the questions. So, because of that, and also I'm also IPC coordinator of the college, so other works are there. So I could not respond to Father Jagdish when he approached me for this. So at one point of time, I thought I might not be there because the way Satya Nilayam functions, I know that he wanted me to actually give the abstract on a particular date, which I didn't do. He said another date for paper, that was I didn't do. So I thought my name will be removed. Because that's the practice of Satya Nilayam, because they always take things beforehand. But fortunately, we have kind-heartedness for the Jagdish. I'm still here. And also, as I told you, as part of the department, I'm part of this department, so I'm very happy. Now, hope you can see the some Sanskrit quotes I want to mention. This is a shloka from Bhagavad Gita. I thought I'll take it as the first step for my talk on such. Before that, I was actually intrigued when principal was talking about the self. He said he looked at it from a sociological angle, that which develops. I have a premise based on a particular adage. It says that you are not one but three. Every person is not one but three. The one he thinks himself to be, the one others think himself to be, and the one he really is. What principle said about the formation of the self deals with the first two, the one you think yourself, the one others think yourself to be. Of course, later Father Rector also mentioned about the spiritual aspect. It is that which we talk of who I really am. So these three make it a picture. That's the premise that I had, and luckily principal came out with that idea. Why I mentioned this is, in my presentation, I may read some portions here and there, but my thing is basically from this particular point. And second thing is, when we talk of man, it is the complex whole. It is neither the psychological, nor the psychical, nor the physical, nor the material, but also the spiritual. So that's why I mentioned you are not one but three. So when we talk of the development of the self, as the principal mentioned, it is with respect to the physical self or the psychical self. But here in Indian philosophy, he also mentioned another word. Apart from development, he also mentioned one word as a passing reference, unfoldment. Here, the realization of the discovering of the self is the unfoldment. That's why I started with the spiritual self. It is not something, as he mentioned, when you talk of discovering, he said he had some basically title Discovering Self. Because discovery is looking at something which is already there. But here, the self is already there, is the premise with which in India we have developed our care of the self. So, in that manner, it is nothing but an unfoldment. In fact, another term which refers to the cosmic self in Indian philosophy, in Sanskrit, is Brahman. That Brahman comes from the root which means Brut. Brut means that which grows. In other words, it's unfoldment. So, this I thought I can give a response to what he said. But now going to this particular shloka, this shloka is the 11th shloka in chapter 2 of Bhagavad Gita. Prajñavadascha bhashase gatasuna nanashochanchi pandita. That is, meaning is given there. Although you speak, because when the Bhagavad Gita took place, Arjuna was reluctant to fight. At that time, Krishna tells this particular thing. What he means is, he addresses Arjuna like this. Bhagavana Vacha means the Lord speaks. Although you speak wisely, he tells Krishna, when he tells Arjuna, although you speak wisely, you are lamenting for something that should not make you sad. Those who really know the truth do not grieve for the dead or for the living. Those who know the truth do not grieve or feel bad for the dead, because what Krishna means here, what is he going to talk about in this particular verse? That is, you should know the real, what you are, what they are. Because we all know when Arjuna was lamenting, why should I fight my teacher, Drona? Why should I fight my grandfather, Bhishma? Why should I fight my brothers, Drona, Duryodhana? That is when he says that, in other words, we all have come into this world just as they have come into a railway platform. In the railway platform, various people come from various places, waiting for a particular train. We all have come into this world waiting for something. It is that premise that this particular shloka I thought of citing, and it helps me to go into yoga further. To yoga, the recognition of man as Purusha particular, two terms which you need to understand from Indian philosophy. One is Purusha, one is Prakriti. And one thing I should tell you, yoga philosophy depends on Sankhya for its metaphysics. And Sankhya is one of the orthodox schools of Indian philosophy, which can be kept as dualistic in our regular terms, because they accepted two realities. One, the self, the other one is matter. Self is termed as Purusha in Sanskrit, and matter is termed as Prakriti in Sanskrit. And Purusha or self, according to Sankhya, is conscious but not active. It is conscious. It can make others happy, but it is conscious. Whereas on the other hand, Prakriti is active but not conscious. So what Sankhya says, these two have come together for the evolution of world. There it is not creation. Here word about Sankhya is evolution. Something that evolved from Purusha Prakriti combination. This combination, these two are totally different. One is conscious, one is unconscious. How the two come? They give an example of a lame man and a blind man. Lame man can see but not walk properly. Blind man cannot see but can walk properly. So what they say is the lame man sits on top of the blind man. He shows the way and the blind man walks. Something like that, this happened. How this relationship between Purusha and Prakriti happened, it's not given, but they say that when once the Purusha comes into contact, the other evolutions of Prakriti embroils the Purusha like that. That's all matter. They go, we will not go into that. But why I'm interested in yoga is, taking this metaphysics, yoga is also applying it to our personal life, our day-to-day life. So only in that respect I thought I would bring it here. So to yoga, the recognition of man and Purusha Prakriti combination seems to be the fundamental step. So I'll just leave it. My own opinion. Why I'm interested here is, this particular Purusha Prakriti combination is what I want to emphasize as the concept of person. Why I mention is, we as human beings, we are endowed with a body, with senses. And Indian philosophy talks of 10 types of senses, 5 Dharmendras, 5 Jnanendras, sense organs and organs of action, plus the Antakarana. Antakarana is the inside organ, which is the mind, plus ego. Then we got the self, which is the charity, like the charity, like that. So here, when we talk of my person, it is not really the body, it is not really the mind, it is not really the ego, because when I say I can say here. When I call Jagdish, he will say yes. When I call Anjali, somebody will say yes. When I call Satish, somebody will say yes. So somebody will say I. The I is common to all. But you all are different from one another. Then what is that I? That is what I want to give as response to the principle, because here there is something that is at the time of birth. What is given birth? The body evolves, the mind evolves, the brain evolves, they all grow. But that which is born, that ultimate is the self in Indian philosophy. And that, in fact, in Tamil, this self is identified in Sanskrit, we call it Purusha. In Tamil, I don't know how many of you in Tamil, we have the term Anma for referring to Purusha. There is also another word, our lexicon gives another word that's Uyir. Uyir means life principle. That is also referred to self. So, that which is the basis of life, that is what self is. And then, from yoga, many sutras can be substantiated for this time. Of course, I am just giving it in a nutshell. Here, these sutras can be taken together and summarized the following. They can be summarized. The Purusha been established in himself, because the Purusha is established here and also elsewhere. That is what it is. Purusha been established in himself after Kaivalya. That is the liberation. That is the idea of liberation. Yoga is called Kaivalya from Prakriti. That because there, the Purusha and Prakriti are related. When once a Purusha gets out of the relation, that is liberation according to Sankhya and Yoga philosophy. So that J.H. Woods translates that word as Kaivalya as isolation. The isolation of Purusha from Prakriti. Because liberation, liberation, some people say going to heaven, some people say merging with God. Here it is liberation from the Prakriti, the unconscious matter. And also when the self is in constant contact with the body, it is bound by the modifications of mind, bound by certain hindrances like ego, avidya, ignorance, raga, attachment, dvesha, hatred, and avidya, will to live. All these modifications and hindrances affect us. Now, getting rid of this is liberation in yoga, and that self, that why I am saying this is self as me, as embodied in the body. That is one self. But the self looking for liberation, liberating from Prakriti, and that is the true reality. Because from my study of Carl Jung's analytical psychology, when we talk of man, we immediately refer to the ego. Ego is only an element of Prakriti according to Sankhya. It's only a matter which is in conjunction. Only difference is it identifies itself with the self and thinks that it is a self. And that is the idea of self. Ego is the idea of the self. Now, when I say I say I am fat, I am tall, I am short. That I refer to the body. When I say I am angry, I am sad, it refers to the mental state. Now, when I say I am I, what does it mean? That is the real identity that we have to come to, and that is the Kaivalya that they talk of. So now coming to this Yoga Sutras, the person here can be understood psychologically and also physical appearance, which I mentioned already. And there is one more thing, namely mind. That quite a few things apart from Purusha Prakriti, you need to understand Ahankara, that's the ego, Asmita, the sense of person, which is again a form of ego which relates itself to the self and the sense of personality. And then Vrittis is the modifications. The mind modifies, like sense, sleeping. Sleeping is also a kind of mental modification, memory, all those things like that. And then there's one more thing, the mind is referred as Manas or Manas, which is translated by J.H. as mind stuff. Yeah? Because yoga, the first basic definition of yoga is yoga chitta vritti yoga. Chitta means a combination of which is called the mind stuff, because it's a combination of mind, ego, and buddhi. These three terms is chitta. Now, vritti is modification. When I am here, when I am talking also, various thoughts come to me. That's why sometimes I go this way, that way. So I want to read, but then I'm again doing it. Because as teachers, when we talk, we just go everywhere, and that's why I want to read. But anyway, what happens is this is the modification. When we are, as a human being, these modifications affect us. And because of that, we are involved in what we do. But yoga says that we have to get out of that modification. That is the chitta vritti. Nirodha means destruction, cessation. And then, one particular sutra that I want to mention. This is the sixth sutra of second book of Yoga Cancer comprises of 4 books. Yoga Sutra comprises of 4 books. Second book, sixth sutra, talks like this: Drikdashna Shaktyoho Ekatmadeva Asmita. Asmita is the ego, the sense of egoism, sense of personality. Egoism, the identification of the seer with the instrument of seeing. And ego is the result of this. Asmita is nothing but the result of ignorance. As I told you, the cliches hindrance. One of them is avidya, ignorance. It is because of ignorance that I take myself in what I am. That's why I mentioned what you think you are. I take myself in what I am. You think of me in some manner because you look at me as a person, not as a person but as an ego that I am reflecting. So therefore, yoga refers to this as the self that is beyond the ego. That is beyond the mind, that is beyond the senses. Because when I say, as I told you, my face, my shirt, my watch, my paper, then who is that mind? That I is a self. So that self is described as seer or witness, sakshi. That is the inner control. Because, like I said, the charity, the self controls my body. My mind thinks, it thinks of certain things. Rationalizes. My eyes see, my ears hear. But what controls all this is my inner control. Likewise, for the world, for the Prakriti, self is the inner controller. And two other shloka, these two, that is verse 29 of chapter 2 and verse 4 of chapter 1, which when taken together gives us a clear picture of the nature of the seer or the self. The seer is nothing but pure consciousness or power of seeing, which appears to see through the mind buddhi complex. Because when I am seeing, when I ask somebody what is this, they say it's my microphone. How do you know? I see it. But it's not simply like that. It's not just seeing us. When I see, the object should get impressed in my mind. What impresses that in my mind? What is it that makes my categories of what a microphone is? Because this is not a microphone if no electricity passes through it. Am I right? It's a microphone only when it's connected to the amplifier and only when the electricity is passing through it. If not, it is just an object. You know what happens in assembly with this mic. In the state assemblies, you know what happens with this. I hope you all know. They used it to crash the others. Now, is this a microphone there? So, what happens is, this is an object which has the power from somewhere. Similarly, our bodies have the power from somewhere. And that is the self which philosophy takes, unlike the sociologists. So, I want to just quote one particular person. I.P. Sachdeva has written a book on the Sankhya of personality. He says, does not speak of man merely as a biological psychological organism, but considers man as self of Purusha. This approach, he adds, gives a complete vision of what man potentially is. It is evident from now that man should not be viewed in relation to self. I want to mention that. So just go to the next one. The person in yoga can categorize both negative. There's one more thing. The concept of person in yoga can categorize both negative and positive. In the negative sense, it refers to the asmita, the sense of personality. But in the positive sense, it refers to the isolated, liberated self. That is the self, Purusha that is called. The two shlokas that I mentioned here, shloka 7 and 8 here. One more thing, shloka 2 of book 4, shloka 7 and 8 of book 4. All these things can be seen to understand what a true self is. I just conclude with that of these three. From these threefold works are manifested in each state only those desires fitting to that state. That is, each one. And when you are looking at the ego, you got one function. When you are looking at the mind, you got one function. But you are looking at the whole, the complete, you got another function. This negative conception of person can be understood best in the manner in which A.K. Majumdar understood the Sankhya concept of man. He says, quote, individual Purusha is nothing but the absolute Purusha as invested in the three gunas. The gunas are executed in such mental states as the unselfish strength, spiritual pursuit, egoism, dullness, etc. In the positive sense, egoic person, egoic conception of person revolves around the liberated person. Now, why am I making this division? I just told you that. Not very clear, doesn't matter. Non-attachment of passionlessness is understood by Patanjali, the author of Yoga Sutra, one of the, or systematizer, I can say author, systematizer, as one of the means of restraining mental functions. Sutra 15 of 1, book 1 and 6, 15 and 16 of book 1 define non-attachment because how I was talking the two selves, self-embodied and the liberated self. Now, how to get to that liberated self? There are two parts of yoga researches. One is practice, abhyasa. The other one I will come later. Practice abhyasa. Vyasa wrote a bhasha for Yoga Sutra. In his bhasha, or in his 12 to 14 sutras of book 1, Vyasa compares this flow of mental operations to the flow of river stream. He says that the flow can be in two directions, towards good and towards evil. The flow towards isolation, towards discrimination is good, and the flow towards object non-discrimination is evil. Such pronouncements make it clear that the understanding of person in yoga can be understood with respect to self. Okay. So, apart from practice, there is one thing, and there is non-attachment. What happens is, these two practice and non-attachment should go together. When I, for example, take ice cream, I like it, I'm attached to it. So next time when I go there, I prefer that because of my previous experience. That attachment, we should not have that. Now, during this COVID times, how many of you or how many of us go to hotels? Earlier we used to go very often, but now we restrain. That sort of restraint is good. Now, here we are not forced, but we are restrained by ourselves. So, the identification of self should be from ourselves. It should not be forced upon by others. And there is one more text apart from Yoga Sutra, but prior to that, called Sankhya Karika of Ishvara Krishna. I have taken some verses, maybe when I give the paper, maybe you can read it. There are certain verses which also talk of the self as a witness and seer, especially verses 10, 11, 19, 20 of the Sankhya Karika. 10 and 11 taken together, these two Karikas present us with an idea of Prakriti along with the evolution of Purusha. To put it simply, two Karikas are going to explain the nature of Purusha of the verse, of the nature of the unworld Prakriti. Just skip some portions from that. And because here these Karikas try to explain what the self is, what the body is, what the matter is, and what is the difference between the two, and why the self should isolate itself from that. That's all. These are the Karikas that are there, and therefore it is submitted. The task of understanding the nature of Purusha is simplified by Karika 19, which mentions two properties of Purusha. They are Purusha is the reverse of Prakriti, self is the outburst, the reverse of the matter, and two, self is the witness, free from misery and non-agent. Now, when I am here, I think that I am talking. Now, again, just a small example, just to give a deviate. I am talking, my voice is heard to you. Do you hear my voice directly through the speakers? You hear my voice through the speakers, especially people at the back. So what happens is, these speakers represent my voice. Similarly, here, when I say that I am the speaker, I can think that I am a speaker, but for you, the speakers are the physical speakers are the speakers, or somebody who is in the online mode, who is listening to my talk or to the seminar in the online mode. For them, that object is the instrument and I am the speaker. Similarly, the self is the main body, mind, ego, or instruments. This is the idea of Indian philosophy, especially of yoga also. And some of the other things I will just skip. We are going to come to a major portion because apart from talking of this self in metaphysical sense, I find the yoga to be relevant to our contemporary also, to our day-to-day life also. That's what I want to mention here because metaphysical thing you all will be doing. As also I mentioned, all these karikas which you can go through, all these sutras of yoga you can take. One more thing. When you talk of the relationship between Purusha and Prakriti, what is that kind of relationship? According to Sankhya, that relationship is organic. When two coaches are linked to each other, railway coaches are linked to each other, there's a link. The third thing. As I said, when I am talking to you, there's this microphone or speaker as a link. That's the connection between me and you, linked by the third thing. But the connection between Purusha and Prakriti is not like that. It's not a third thing coming to it. It is something organic. Organic, you all know, it is there within like the relationship between the fingers and the hand, relationship between the hand and the body. It's an organic. Because once the hand is removed, it becomes waste. But this can be connected to some other device also. But my hand, if it is removed, that's why it's organic. So the relationship between Purusha and Prakriti is organic. Looked in this way, the individual is the individual self. Looked in this way, the individual, the man, is nothing but the individual self invested with the three gunas. We have one more term in Sanskrit, in philosophy called gunas, which doesn't have a direct meaning in English. It's attributes, not qualities but attributes, because the three of them, sattva, rajas, and tamas. Sattva refers to the good aspect, spiritual aspect. Rajas is activity, which is neither good nor bad. Tamas is darkness. Sattva is bright. Tamas is opposite darkness. But Rajas, it can go with Sattva, it can go with Rajas. That's why I mentioned earlier. This is like a stream. The water can flow this way or that way. Similarly, I can identify myself with that. When I say I, the self of me, can identify myself with the body and think that I am the agent. But knowing that I am different, I should look for the highest isolation and liberation. That's the two things here. And one of the karika, one of the sutras is taken by Sutra 34, I think. Sutra 34, the last one of the fourth book of Yoga Sutra. Of course, I just saw yesterday that in one book there will be 33 in that thing. I don't know why I should check it. I went last week to check that, look into that. That sutra goes like this. The resolution in the inverse order of the qualities, bereft of any motive of action for the Purusha, is Kaivalya, or it is establishment of the power of knowledge in its own. That is, when this self is identified in the body, I think I am talking here, I am driving there, I am doing that work. But, as I told you before, I apologize for my because of my work in college. I am going to be a controller or the teacher only for the next few years. After retirement, before coming to the college, before joining the college, before 96, I joined Vivekananda. Before that, I was just a Chandrasekhar. After joining that, I became Chandrasekhar, close to Chandrasekhar of Vivekananda College. After retirement, again Chandrasekhar. So, this is only a temporary thing. Similarly, the attachment between body and the Purusha and Prakriti is only temporary according to yoga. And one more thing. I just want to show this and indicate that. Before that, one karika of Sankhya karika goes like this, and it has been interpreted like this. There are three parts to this sentence, and we should examine them. I can go to this verse karika 64 of Ishwarika of Sankhya karika, which mentions three characters. I am not. Not is mine. Ego exists not. What does this mean? When I say I am not, what it really means is that I am not now what I thought myself to be. Not is mine. It really means that my present contents are entirely different in kind from those which I thought myself to have during the state of bondage. Because the state of bondage is state of liberation. What I think myself to be at the state of bondage is different from what I think in the state of liberation. Ego exists not. This is the ego exists not. What it really means is this: I am no longer a selfish egoist. My particular individuality has been completely transformed into universal personality. Now, I just thought I would refer to one psychologist, humanistic psychologist, Abraham Maslow. He talks of characteristics of a real healthy personality. Some characteristics are mentioned. I'll just read one or two like that. Like person with true characteristic, healthy personality, perceives reality more comfortably, is not ashamed of his shortcomings, is generally not much concerned about himself, is characterized by detachment and desire for privacy. He remains serene and happy even in the midst of circumstances that will drive other people to suicide. His interpersonal relation is changed and is characterized by, because when I think that I am not restricted to ego but something beyond. And that self, when I look at myself from that angle, then my attitude towards me and towards others changes, and that is the healthy personality. That's why I given this particular diagram. Of course, it's not mine. I take it from one author, Nicholas DiCaprio. His work on personality theory is a guide to human behavior. 4 diagrams, only 2 of them. If you see here, ego is that which is known to others. When you talk of Chandrasekhar, or when I talk to you, it's only what I present myself to. That's what you are taking myself to be my personality. That is the ego. So various stimuli come and I talk according to that. Sometimes maneuver if required. But what is not palatable to me, what is not palatable to others, I represent. That's what goes to unconscious psychologists say, as Sigmund Freud had brought in. But then Sigmund Freud stopped it at that where he said we repress. Carl Gustav Jung, who was a disciple of Freud, he looked at the unconscious in a larger sense, as I think Victor mentioned in a different manner, that is of a collective unconscious, because the unconscious, he was mentioning about the personal unconscious. But there's apart from personal unconscious, there's also a collective, the unconsciousness of the clan, of the race. Now, what happens? I must bring everything into my personality. Only then I will look at myself or look at the world in one particular, in a holistic manner. So what happens is, we say the friend, ego, then the persona. The term personality comes from the term personal, which means mask. So whatever personality we talk of ourselves and others, is only a mask that we wear, because we try to suppress our other feelings. So then, personal conscious, what happens is our stimuli, which we can go to the next one also. With that we will just that. What happens is that division between the conscious side, personal conscious side, unconscious, collective conscious, everything is gone, and we look at ourselves and the world as a total. Our approach to the world will be different when we look at ourselves as the pure, the real self, not pure, real self. Because that is nothing but the unfoldment. As Principal mentioned, it's the sociologically they talk like that. But then here, what I am unfolds through my experiences, through my interactions, through my works. So it is not something that is coming with, the difference between discovery and innovation. Innovation is something that is brought, which is not there. It's brought newly. But here it is already there. So what he mentioned, discovery, it's already there. That is an unfoldment. That is what we call it as a self-realization in Indian philosophy. Of course, in other philosophies also we talk of but the basic understanding of self differs. In fact, Carl Jung, he talks of the process of individuation, where he says, I had to restructure my center. Normally, when I talk of myself, I revolve around the ego of myself. But he says I should go beyond. But the ego is not going to be the center of the consciousness. But when we bring in the unconscious side, where there are other things that comes into picture, therefore ego cannot be held with the middle, center. Therefore there's the other one. So there's the other one, which is the main center. He calls it the restructured center. And that restructured center, he named it as self. Not the self that philosophers talk of, but he named it self because of want of any other term. That self is what I find with respect to yoga, which is both at the metaphysical level and also in our level. So I thought I'd present with that. So thank you so much for the kind invitation and also for your patience. Of course, I've taken some 15 minutes extra, but sorry, that's why I mentioned. Anyway, thanks a lot for Jagdish and Father Lawrence for Robin, sorry. Thank you all.
I invite Father Lindsay Lobo, Assistant Professor, Secretary of College Satya Nilayam, to come over the dais. Father Lindsay Lobo, alumnus of Satya Nilayam, as a student and loved teacher now, is a man of all seasons other than rainy season perhaps. After roaming in Rome, Father Lindsay landed here in Chennai in 2021. He has been an active staff member in SNRI, a well-updated teacher in teaching skills, and also inspires students with his photography and computer skills and sports. Dear Father Lindsay, we are very happy to have you here today as one of the resource persons. And now may I request you to address us in the second session of the seminar. Please note, the speaker will have 20 minutes, followed by 10 minutes of interactive session.
Okay, thank you, Royster. And so, as you can see, the topic that I have selected is discovering self through the moral social realm. And I would like to begin through the famous saying of Socrates, that is, know thyself and you will know the world. Now this is something that has been echoed by all philosophers, and this represents the longing of all human beings. At the same time, we see that humans have been intrigued with the essence of self, the whole thing of knowing what is the self, discovering the self, especially with regards to its contents, to its sources, in order to get a better understanding of life. And we see that Socrates takes a recourse to knowledge in order to find this out. But today we'll be proceeding more towards the moral social realm, trying to understand how self is being discovered through George Herbert Mead's interpretation. The question, who am I? I think all of us will be familiar with that. At one point of time, we would have asked ourselves. Well, this question cannot be merely considered as a biographical question that only tries to obtain information about our origin or status. It has to be an ontological and ethical question that seeks an understanding of the essence of a person's existence, and at the same time, it also refers to the life strategy that is required in order to attain that essence. At the same time, one cannot understand this entire question of self-discovery as the analysis and true knowledge of the potentialities of an individual. Now, when we speak about the self-discovery, First and foremost, this basically refers to a thorough analysis of ourselves and introspection as such, in order to come to a proper understanding of what truly consists or constitutes ourselves. The 21st century welcomes all of us with a lot of challenges, and we are given various tasks that test our overall mental and physical ability. Let's take for example the COVID-19 pandemic. This, I feel, has been one of the biggest challenges of this century, because man was put in such a situation wherein he was not able to determine what had to be done in order to remedy the situation. And therefore this led to the whole concept of self-discovery. Why? Because when you are in a situation where you do not know what to do, you tend to rely on something that you have for yourself as concrete, and that is your identity. Now the importance of the discovery of self has gained a lot of significance in the past few years, and there's a lot of effort that has gone to understand oneself, and at the same time there's been a lot of effort to also deal with stress and challenges that have been put forth in this new era. Now most people would generally associate self-discovery with taking a personality test or doing some soul searching in order to figure out what they really want to do. In fact, self-discovery, we see, is fundamental to the personal development, and it has many implications along the way. Now let's take a look at the purpose or the essence of human life. Now, as we all have established, the question, who am I, entails an ontological setting. And one of the reasons for this is that this question concerns the meaning, purpose, and essence of human existence in general. And when we normally question our essence or being, the question does not arise because we have forgotten who we are. It arises basically because of the nature of the human situation. And therefore the basis of this question lies in the fact that nothing seems to give us perpetual happiness. Nothing is absolutely guaranteed for anyone. Now different thinkers have gone to various extents in order to explain this. And this goes to indicate that there can be many solutions to the question of who I am. At the same time, we see a lack of knowledge of the self decreases self-efficacy and self-respect. When you do not know who you are confused. And this also then leads to a lack of morale within the person. Your self-confidence reduces, and you are always trying to look for something which may or may not be there. Whereas when you look at self-discovery, we see that self-discovery awakens the passion that we all of us have within us. And this discovery ultimately leads to self-fulfillment and satisfaction. And therefore we see that once we discover, once we understand the roots of ourselves, we are then able to continue on the path. When the individual is comfortable with the true self, it is only then where he can achieve what he has. Next, we shall take a look at the true self as a source of meaning in life. Now we see that most philosophers and thinkers are basically of the view that acting in accordance with the inner self is the key to self-fulfillment. And therefore scholars have commented on how the erosion of culturally embraced structures and sources of meanings have left the individual with the primary task of finding the meaning of life. Existential philosophers have long held the view that coming to a deep realization of one who imbues life with a sense of authentic purpose. Similarly, we see that scholars of eudaimonic well-being, consider meaning in life to be the central component of human flourishing. And therefore it becomes evident that when faced with a challenge or a tough situation, individuals begin to look to their individuality for solutions and answers to the various questions. Similarly, we see that choices and actions are judged in terms of how they make the self feel, and those acts that we do, those decisions that we take, it makes the inner self feel good. And when this happens, we are then able to value our choices. So ultimately it all boils down to finding the very essence of the self. Now from this it becomes evident that there is a unique relationship between the core elements of the self and the experience of meaning. Now meaning is not simply obtained from performing well, but it is the feeling that one is in touch with and enacting goals that are expressions of who one believes he or she really is. And therefore we see that the true self should be connected to a number of other sources, such as relationships, goals, and authentic behaviors. This does not mean that relationships and goals are not meaningful in themselves, but rather we see that the true self provides a person with a unique life philosophy. Next, let's come to the unearthing of the essence. Now, here we take recourse to the existentialists, and we see that dealing with concepts such as self-discovery, self-understanding, they teach us that first and foremost, man exists. It is only then that he defines himself. And therefore, existentialists maintain the view that man is free and can spontaneously bring about any desired change in the state of affairs. From the existentialist, we come to know that self-discovery comes from a constant analysis of the self and a commitment to whatever values he has chosen and the objectives that he has set. At the same time, in this particular scenario, one also realizes that it is the totality of one's acts that really matters. It is the totality of one's potential that gives one's meaning in life. And therefore, existentialism also indicates that there is no more universal moral code to which the individual should avert his conduct. At the same time, we see that the essence or the purpose of life is what man discovers and works out in the course of living for himself. So, as we move towards the path of self-discovery, first and foremost, we realize that the individual should begin from the self. We first start from ourselves, and it is only when that the individual can think of the possibility of himself, when he has got a thorough understanding of himself, it is only then that he can proceed towards really unearthing this essence, really looking at his inner core and inner self. Now we take the help of George Herbert Mead, who basically gave us a relational, sociological and moral view in self-discovery. Now we see that the works of Mead provide a solid and sustained basis if one wants to engage relational sociology and morality in our day-to-day life situation. Now let us take a look at why Mead's work is very important for us to discover ourselves. First and foremost, the theory of Mead emphasizes the need for moral integration and habituation as an inherent aspect of the the emergence of self. Next, we see that his theory has the advantage of explaining how the interactional process of socialization brings generalized moral expectations into the experience of the individual. That is, it is only when we interact with one another can we be able to then get a proper worldview about ourselves. Thirdly, we see that Mead's theory also lays emphasis on the presence of the mundane reflexivity in interaction. And finally, Mead's theory of the self is based on a simultaneous process of socialization and individuation. Coming to the social emergence of self, one can say that the arguments of Mead are better suited in providing a relational explanation of how people engage with morality in practice in the ways that they do. And here we see that Mead's theory provides an interactional account of how and why the self is necessarily socially constituted and embedded. The self finds its meaning in the society, in its interactions with others. To put it in other words, we can say that when we interact with one another, the others are like a mirror. And therefore, whatever we do, however the person reacts to us, that is a self-indication to us of how our behavior has been. If you are rude, you will expect to get a rude answer back. If you are smiling, happy, you can also expect the other person to display a positive mood. And therefore, Mead describes the emergence of self as primarily a mediated process of socialization through which the person's experience is integrated with the internalized attitudes of others. It is through the others that you ultimately lead to this self-fulfillment and self-discovery. At the same time, we see that Mead also provides a description of the emergence of self as a process of the habituated internalization of generalized expectations that endangers the development of a reflexivity capable agent. And in other words, we can say that Mead's work provides us with a description of how we as actors engage with practice at varying levels in our lives. Mead argues that individuals can develop the capacities associated with selfhood only through social interaction. And he argued that having a self means having the capacity for self-conscious awareness of oneself as an object of reflexive consideration. And this is where we see that what Mead refers to as the I emerges, which is to say that the child develops a sense of herself or himself as a subject who acts. But at the same time, the child can also assume a perspective towards her actions, having arrived at a degree of awareness of how her actions have been received. For example, if you behave badly, you will be punished. So similarly, depending on the way you ask for certain things, you also get a positive or a negative answer. And it is based on these reflexes, on these responses, that ultimately you begin to develop a concept. Now for Mead, the I is the actor who is in the process of doing the acting. He is the person who is doing the monitoring of action, and as the self develops, the I also does the reflecting upon oneself. And he says that the individual gradually develops a sense of the self as an object. Now indeed we see that this process begins as the attitudes of others become internalized in relation to one's own. For example, as a child, if we did not use the word please, our parents sometimes refused to give us something. Why? Because they wanted us to use the word please. And therefore, as a child, what we realized is, if we do not use the word please, if we are not polite in asking, we won't get it. And slowly, this behavior, these small things led us to develop a concept, to develop the capacity of assuming a particular attitude. That is to be polite, that is to ask respectfully. And this basically then leads to internalization of various attitudes. Mead commonly reserves the me to refer to stages further on in the development of the self, in which he says that the individual has taken on the attitudes of the generalized others, with he engages more abstractly. So, it is here that the me aspect of the self develops as the collective self and utilized in the engagement with themselves as a subject. Speaking about the dialogic selfhood, we can see that what needs to be significantly indicated here is that the emergence of the self is a product of intersubjectively mediated self-understanding. Now, Mead explains individuation as being an inherent facet of the social constitution of the self, in which interactional engagement within a complex social context is productive of a simultaneously embedded and individuated subjectivity. And once this is internalized and generalized, and once specific attitudes are developed dialogically, we see that this then leads the individual to bring different perspectives into play. Finally, we can take a look at the Rosicrucians. Now, who are the Rosicrucians? They are a community of philosophers who study and practice the natural laws governing the universe. And therefore, their mission is to provide seekers with spiritual wisdom that is necessary for them to reach deep down and be connected with themselves. So, they have suggested a few things that could basically help the individual to arrive at this self-discovery. First and foremost is introspection, looking at oneself. Next, they also say that we need to be modest, avoid flaunting our accomplishments and not being boastful. We also need to be decisive. That is, once a decision has been taken, after careful consideration, it needs to be worked out upon. Next, they also tell us to be a frontliner. In life, it's important to take risks, and without risks, you won't be able to discover other things. For example, if a person is content with himself, he will not be able to realize that he can do something else. Next, prudency is also very important. We did not delight in the downfall of others, nor gloat about our achievements. And therefore, humility is one in which we are able to keep a balance between ourselves and who we really are. Then they also tell us to be content with what is there and practice moderation, because moderation in all things helps to avoid excessive preoccupation with fleshly desires. And finally, a self-analysis from time to time also plays a very important part in discovering oneself, in discovering one's essence. And finally, to conclude, I would like to take certain cues from this pandemic situation in which all of us would have discovered something or the other about ourselves. Now, first and foremost, when the classes were online. I'm sure the academicians may not agree with this, but for the students, it was definitely an opportunity to engage in other skills rather than simply memory and study. As a result of this, we saw that people began to discover various talents. Google and the internet, especially YouTube, saw the surge of a number of channels being created. People who had different talents, somebody who could cook, started putting up their content. Because cooks could not come to certain places, people started discovering the skills of cooking. And similarly, since people were locked down and had a lot of time at their disposal, various other talents were discovered. So therefore we see that it is a situation in which we are in that forces us to take drastic steps, and these drastic steps ultimately lead us to self-discovery. A perfect example of this could be when it comes to swimming. You can either send a person for classes, or you can directly throw the person into the water and hope that he would basically develop the inborn talent of swimming. And therefore, it is only we, through our society, through others around us, that can develop the real I, the real me. And therefore, in conclusion, taking at what Mead says, we can say that it is only through the attitudes that we gain from others around us that we can truly develop ourselves and truly look at our inner essence in order to achieve self-fulfillment. Thank you.
We have still some time left. If there are any questions or doubts are there, please feel free to ask.
Just to break the ice. See that self is socially constructed. Am I right? So without the other person, is it possible to construct oneself? Because we need the other. If there were no human person on the earth except one person left in the world, would that have been a possibility of evolution of self?
If we are all alone, we normally discover that what we are doing is right. In that way, there is no natural indication for us as what is right, what is wrong. Because we are the master, it's like being on a desert island. You are entirely the master of it. You can do whatever you want. Now, it is only when you are in relation with others that restrictions come in. And we basically also see that only, for example, one of the philosophers who basically mentions you have the I and you have the others. So therefore we see that the other acts as a boundary or a barrier towards me to check my actions, and similarly I also act as a check for the actions of the others. So in this way, the society or the others around us act as a check on our actions, and this check will ultimately lead us to discover ourselves.
The other one creates yourself.
Other one helps. It helps. It aids our self-discovery.
A round of applause to our answer. Where actions are silent, words speak. Thank you very much for the leadership, for the wonderful session. It was very informative and creative. Now I request the Registrar Father Francis to felicitate Father Lindsay with a token of love. We shall go to the third session of the day. May I now invite Father Martin to come on the dais. The resource person for the third session is Father Martin Assistant Professor Father Martin is one of the new staff by institution. However, he is also the alumnus of Satya Nilayam as a student. Father Martin is a person whose words speak less but actions speak more. He is a highly intellectual person, yet simple in lifestyle. Perhaps that is why students love listening to him inside and outside the class. We are indeed fortunate to have Father Martin with us as one of the resource persons. Dear Father Martin, may I invite you to address the gathering.
A very good morning, dear fathers and my dear friends. Good morning. The topic that I have chosen for my presentation is the post-pandemic self, an ethical perspective with special reference to Levinas. So we will be having the understanding of the post-pandemic self from an ethical perspective and put within the framework of existentialist phenomenology. So, let me summarize my entire presentation. This is a summary. The isolated, unconcerned self as ethically wounded in the post-pandemic world. A call to have an ethical stand of self towards the other with special reference to Emmanuel Levinas. So this is the outline of the presentation today. First of all, I will present the context of the paper. The context of the paper is the concretely, ethically challenging post-COVID experiences. Secondly, I will identify the underlying moral issue in those concrete experiences. Thirdly, we will have an ethical reflection on the moral issue identified with special reference to Levinas. And finally, this paper attempts to give an ethical conclusion envisaging a moral human person in the ethically challenging post-COVID scenario. First of all, let us see what is the context of this paper. It is a concrete, ethically challenging post-COVID experiences. As we know, we are living in the post-pandemic world. The pandemic is not over, but post-pandemic in terms of its effects and shadows on humanity. If you want to summarize in one word, what is this post-pandemic world is? The answer is woundedness. People in the post-pandemic world are wounded physically, mentally, economically, psychologically, spiritually, and socially. Pope Francis said that the world is seriously ill from the consequences of the pandemic. He also rightly said the devil is taking advantage of the crisis to sow distrust, desperation, and discord, adding that the pandemic had brought physical, psychological, and spiritual suffering. Together as humanity, we may use all our resources to bring back the things to normal after the pandemic, but in the process, the one thing which we hardly notice underneath is the devastating ethical woundedness of the people. These ethically wounded people in our society today are the isolated, unconcerned human beings in the post-pandemic world. Let us now see some of the shadows of pandemic in the post-pandemic world. Number one, increase of isolating addictions to mobiles, gaming disorder, and exposure to porn contents. These online contents have the tendency to reduce the sensitivity of the players towards violence. We see so many violence in the newspaper. These things made the individuals to look for isolation, places of secrecy, urge for private space, etc., and escalated individualism. And many children nowadays, including the members of my own family, prefer to play with mobiles to enjoying the company of parents and friends. This is a new generation emerging. Secondly, our economy is also clashing with morality. The sectors that are fulfilling basic human needs like education, healthcare, and religious support were badly affected. But the online sectors, sowing the seeds of moral degradation in easily accessible modes, caused moral havoc in the minds of young people during the pandemic. And also thirdly, an isolation is always linked to domestic violence. National lockdown has reported more than 50% rise in domestic violence, intimate partner violence, sexual violence and harassment, rape, forced sexual acts, unwanted sexual advances, child sexual abuse, forced marriage, street harassment, stalking, cyber harassment, etc., and child marriages, unwanted pregnancies, and abortions increased. Then, loss of jobs. This loss of jobs, according to the statistics, say it has increased both male and female prostitutions as well as crimes in the major cities across India. Let us see some other manifestations of moral degradations in the post-pandemic world. Poverty, ignorance, breakdown of traditional values, and the tendency to defy norms. Disrespectful human interaction, families and institutions are falling apart. Escalated self-centered individualism also. Then self-absorption without compassion is also very prevalent. The widening gap between the rich and the poor, threatening the delicate social fabric of a nation, and co-created population of orphaned children. Then you have the increased stress, escalation in alcohol consumption, and also the coronavirus pandemic has permanently changed our relationship with technology, accelerating the drive towards digitalization. And we also have an increased non-suicidal self-injury. Finally, we have also implementation of many laws, accelerating capitalism at the cost of the well-being of the people during the lockdown. We can keep on piling up so many things like this, but this is very obvious and these wounds are real. And having situated us in the context, let us now identify the underlying moral issue in these concrete experiences. In our ministry places, or where we go for social ministries, or even in our own communities and in our families, in our villages, we must have experienced all these ethically challenging experiences. Now let us now identify the underlying moral issue in these concrete experiences. The underlying moral issue in all these concrete experiences is the ethically rooted and wounding, isolated and isolating, self-centered, immoral, unconcerned masses in the post-pandemic world. When we remember masses, we remember what is happening in Karnataka now. The unconcerned masses are a great threat to our society. Hence, we are in danger of losing a generation. The isolated, unconcerned human beings in the post-pandemic world today. This is a great ethical concern in today's scenario. This ethical woundedness is both a challenge and an opportunity for us today. Now, having identified the underlying moral issue, let us now have an ethical reflection on the issue at hand. So according to deontological ethical theories, there must exist some rule or law which enforces moral value, and that is natural to human person, intuitively known. We have known already. There is then an element of intuition in all the people, no matter how he conceive of it and the way he approach it, whether as conscience of Ockham or logos of Stoics or the a priori categorical imperative of Kant or right reason of Thomas Aquinas. Whatever you take, the one truth is very clear. The element of moral intuition is also found in the teleological ethical theories, whether implicitly or explicitly. It is implicitly found in the concept of ataraxia of Epicurus, in that of eudaimonia of Aristotle, and explicitly the concept of right reason of force in the conscientious feelings of mankind according to Mill. So all these ethical theories, whether they are deontological ethical theories or teleological ethical theories, all these ethical theories point to the natural human desire to strive for ethical perfection. Having established the universality of natural human desire for ethical perfection, let us now try to understand and fix the meaning of ethics. Ethics has been traditionally defined as a philosophical inquiry into the nature and grounds of morality. Now let us, since we have taken existentialist phenomenology as our framework, we will define ethics like this. Ethics as that studies human actions from the point of view of enabling humans to become fully human and fully alive. So actions that are enabling human beings to become fully alive and fully human is called the study of ethics. Thus, it is necessary for us to envisage a kind of ethical human person in a situation marked by ethical challenges where human persons are ethically led astray. Now let us envisage a new human being against the isolated, unconcerned human beings of the post-pandemic scenario through the ethical philosophy of Levinas. The context of Levinas is very similar to our own context. He was a survivor of the Holocaust, we know, and it was a post-Holocaust scenario in which people were devastatingly wounded physically, mentally, culturally, socially and politically. And people became so close because of their traumatic experiences. The people who were silent during the massacre of millions of people continue to remain isolated and unconcerned. It is the situation of Emmanuel Levinas, which is very similar to our situation of post-pandemic context. Thus, we will be looking into the ethics of Levinas to apply to our ethically challenging post-COVID context. Now, as we know, Western philosophy focuses on being. Everything has being. So when philosophers look at being, they tend to group being into two categories, substance and accidents. All the beings. So everything must conform to these in the history of essentialism. And Levinas did not agree with this. He felt that this kind of making divisions thought away all the differences. He believed that this unified way of thinking reduced difference to mere accident. So as a Hebrew, he believed that the singularity of things gave them their identity. So he could find nothing that could unify all things. Hence he chose the good over the being. So a shift from essentialism to existentialism. Rather than investigating being, Levinas investigated the good, because according to him, the good transcends being. If you study a being, the study of being only seeks to understand what was left once the accidents were gone, and it takes away our uniqueness. That is the problem with the study of being. Whereas the good is about the uniqueness rather than commonality. So individuals are unique, and this uniqueness is the interest of the good, according to Levinas. These unique things are traces of the good or God, according to him. Now, where do we find these unique traces of God or the good? Levinas says the eyes have it, the human eyes. For Levinas, The face is the most naked part of the human body. The eyes for living us penetrate every mask. We make immediate contact. The experience is deeply moving when you look at the eyes of the other. It is an original moment of meaning according to me. In the eyes of the other, we cannot reduce a stranger to simply a being. So in the eyes of the other, we see a highness, holiness and divinity. So we can say, it is not that we shall not kill. That is not the ethics. It is we shall not take the otherness away, respect the individuality. They are the unique traces of God. Through their eyes, we will realize who we are. That is understanding of self according to Levinas. Then he is also saying the face is ethical. Eyes are the face. So, the face suggests that there is another order of existence. From his inspiration, the ethical conclusion that we are proposing is envisioning human persons or human self as related and interconnected, looking at the face of the other, amidst the isolated, unconcerned human beings who are ethically wounded in the post-COVID scenario is the need of the hour. That is the conclusion that we are arriving at. Now, we should also keep in mind that this interconnectedness of humans should not exclude nature around us. That is very, very important. That is what the pandemic is teaching us. The COVID-19 pandemic underscores how tightly interwoven humanity has become. A single infected animal somewhere in China set in motion a chain reaction with effects that nearly a year later are still reverberating in every corner of the planet. These challenges of an interconnected world require new approach to ethics. For example, ethics is normally viewed from the perspective of the individual. What should I do? What should I do? Rather than asking what should as a whole humanity do. But sometimes we step back to take in a broader global perspective, asking how the world ought to respond to a pressing concern. Meeting this challenge will require a radical reorientation in our own thinking, seeing our generation as a small part of much greater whole. We will thus need to adopt not merely a global perspective of everyone alive today, but the perspective of humanity itself, the hundreds of generations that are going to come after us. By adopting this ethical lens, we will have a better view of our crucial role in the larger story of our species. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Martin. Now it's time for the question and answer session.
Well, I would like to congratulate you for a beautiful presentation, first and foremost. My question is, I will take it from your presentation. You mentioned that post-pandemic created, we are isolated, some are seeking isolated. Compared to the post-Holocaust scenario, people were traumatized, wounded, but at the end of the Holocaust, the traumatized society came together because they were in need of each other. Keeping that in mind, my question is, if in case the book comes in the future, the pandemic ends, since we have that fear, communicate with each other because we are carrying the virus, so the scenario is different. It is the whole humanity is affected. That Holocaust was one humanity killed other. Therefore, what's your answer? In the future, people will seek each other, or will the same scenario will come or not. The traumatized people will come together and enjoy the world. Will it happen or not? That's my question.
That's a good question. What he's asking is, we are in a situation now where we cannot interact with each other because of the COVID experiences. We don't know how the situation will be in the future. But within the given framework, within whatever resources we have, the available resources, the available interactions, the available time and energy, we have to keep this ethical lens at the behind. Okay, what are we doing? What is our vision in this isolated post-pandemic world? That framework we should keep, the perspective we should keep, and depending on the emerging situations, we have to act according to the driving force that are within. Okay. We don't know what will happen in the future. We are very uncertain. But one thing is sure, we are wounded devastatingly. Yesterday, Father Francis forwarded a video. A professor was expressing her dissatisfaction. She's she's very angry, frustrated, and the students as well. So both the sides, there are problems of woundedness. We are not able to do what is expected of us because of this woundedness. So we need to understand each other and create an atmosphere in which we help each other.
During the pandemic, the social distancing was proposed, and as a result, online or virtual connectedness was in a way kind of enhanced. Now, this virtual connectedness, did it harm the social kind of face-to-face interaction, or does it still continue to harm the social relationships, virtual connections?
Yes. It is because what you said is correct. Now we got used to these kind of virtual interactions more than ever before. So even if we come back to the normal situation, will people be ready to come out of that and interact with people like before? It is a question. Because besides using all these interactions through media, we also got entangled. That is the problem. The general masses, of course, educated people, enlightened people, different matter. The common uneducated masses who are always busy with mobiles and all the things, especially what is happening in our country now. This is the damage that we have done. We will not be able to come back to the original thing. The thing that was before. That's what my understanding. Are we free to come back? Not to come back from using all these social media, but to have a freedom for what purpose we are using, what goals that I am achieving in my life from that perspective.
First of all, thank you for a beautiful presentation. Now my question is, I want some clarification. Since you brought up the issue of our addiction to mobile phones, so even the digital companies have got some ethical frame to conform to or to abide by. And sometimes the goals of those companies are not the same goals as we humans have. For example, the goal of a mobile company would be to attract as many as users possible for the benefit of their own company, and whereas the human goal would be to achieve something concrete, like to grow in oneself, whatever it includes, like cooking, doing all sorts of things besides this mobile activity. Now, so my question is, should the digital companies also have a framework, like as we have taken Levinas as the foundation for the good, so they also must abide by these the standard, the good, so that we are also not affected. Otherwise, the mobile companies are becoming, they are the isolating and we are the isolated, because finally it is they who are profiting from our problem. So, what's your response?
Yeah, that is exactly the point. The economy clashing with morality. Whatever the ethical principles that are guiding them, especially those content providers, online content providers, they also have ethical principles set by the government or some other organization. But at the end of the day, what makes sense is profit. So for the sake of profit, they will do anything. Now if you open the mobile, all the porn contents are there. Do they follow any ethical principles? It is available. Some governments may ban, okay, we are banning these online sites so that our people will not get affected by all these mental and psychological illness. That kind of things are there. But the government is also nowadays is not ready because of the benefits they are getting. That also is, so that the economy is always clashing with morality. That thing is said. Whatever you say, the base is economy in today's capitalist world. Okay, for that they will do anything. Even values can be altered according to their motives. So even the government is also helpless while facing capitalist economy. They can't do anything because they have to sustain the economy of the country also. So all these things are like webs. So one cannot be without the other. Whereas here only the individual responsibility comes forward. We cannot say that all the things are available. They have to do. Whereas we individuals have to take step and say, okay, I am responsible for my things, my growth and my well-being.
Yes, thank you, Brother Martin, for this thought-provoking address and inspiring session on answering doubts of our members here. I request Father Vinod to felicitate Father Martin. The fourth and final session of the day, may I invite Father Jagdish to come on the desk. Father Dr. Jagadishwaraya Murala, Assistant Professor, Sacred Heart College, Satya Nilayam. Father Jagdish is a person well versed in Indian philosophy and teaches the same in our institution. However, he is well updated with other subjects of philosophy and also Yogasana. Being a highly intellectual and knowledgeable person, Father Jagdish is known for his short and sweet talks. Father Jagdish, besides being the convener of today's seminar, is also one of the resource persons. May I now invite Father Jagdish to address the gathering.
It looks like almost the subject is in the reputation of my guide Chandrasekhar. The difference, Dr. Chandrasekhar was giving the comparative study of analytical psychology and yoga, the understanding of the self. What I am proposing in my paper is the discovering the self in a scientific manner by yoga. First chapter, Sutras 1 to 6. This is where we are going to have an exposition how yoga understands the self and how we are supposed to discover self, not for the other's sake, for one's own sake. The first sutra, Atha Yoga Shastranam. Now a little bit of explanation to the terms themselves. Atha usually means afterwards, then, later. A kind of, it is not now, but after. After experiencing something, and now. That and now has to follow. What is that which has gone before? One comes to the realization of yoga. Now this is where yoga starts with. Yoga is not started with the person without having any experience. All these experiences, what we are talking about, the sociological experiences, let us say, a person undergoes a kind of misery in life. And we have one, name in Bhagavad Gita. All the chapters' names are yoga, 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 they give. The first chapter is named as Arjuna Vishada Yoga. Arjuna gets into misery. That is, misery itself is a yoga. You get into difficulties and you begin to consider yourself, why the difficulties? Why am I undergoing such sufferings, such miseries? Once you get fed up with this, only then, that's what the meaning of Atha, only then you can come to the realization of the self, and yoga begins at that point. Now it's a discipline. You cannot simply say, okay, I have experienced misery, I don't want to have any more misery, do away with it. It cannot be done because the sociological aspects, the physiological aspects, the psychological aspects all come together, forcing themselves on you. That's what we need to understand. My mind is there all the time forcing me to come to what we call the dreams, the imaginations, expectations, the hopes, future hopes, all those things. Now they have to be cut, almost like chopped off. There is no future, there is no imagination, there is no dreams, there is no hope. And then the yoga happens. This is what the meaning of the discipline. It is not once and for all. Every time we need to remind ourselves. Then comes the proper meaning of yoga. What do we mean by the term yoga itself? Of course, the explanation is given it is from the root word called yuj, which means to unite. Let us see some of the commentators. We have a surprising commentator in the form of Bhoja. He is a classical commentator of Yoga Sutras somewhere in 8th, 7th, 8th centuries. Now he defines the Patanjali Yoga Sutras as an effort to separate the Atman, that is the reality, from the non-Atman, the apparent reality. See the contradiction, why it is surprising? It is because yuj means to unite, but the commentator says it is not to unite, but it is to separate. Now this is where the contradiction already starts with the term itself. What Patanjali actually means. After 600 years, Bhoja comes to write a commentary. He understands it that way. How do we understand it now? And this is where the whole possibility of understanding the self in the light of yoga comes. Now the popular understanding of this yoga is union of the individual soul with the Supreme Soul. But did Patanjali have put that Supreme Soul or an individual soul. I am not very sure after going through so many years of teaching and learning yoga. There is no Supreme Soul, there is no individual soul according to Yoga Sutras. Except, he says, Ishvara is there, that is what a separate individual. But union as such with that Ishvara is not portrayed in the yoga. Now this is where we have to see what is the classical understanding that we had separation and the union, how they can go together. When you separate the, what do you call, the non-self from the self, already the union happens. You realize that you are not an individual self with the limitations. You are the Supreme Self with the unlimited powers. This is where the yoga comes, the introduction yoga of yourself, which is the reality, not the apparent reality, that which does not have a limitation. The second sutra, we are not talking about the first chapter, that is first book, the first 6 sutras. The second one is Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. This is quoted any number of times with regard to the definition of yoga. This is the definition. Yoga's definition is to what we call nirodha, to stop the chitta vritti, the mental modifications. Yoga has got another definition in Bhagavad Gita. It gives something like yoga karmasu kaushalam. That is something very, very interesting. Yoga is, kaushalam means doing something very easily, happily, like a child's play. Karmashu means in the action. Whatever in actions you do it with ease, without any effort, effortless. The translation is something like yoga is dexterity in action. That dexterity is what the effortless manner of doing. Whatever you do, it looks like you are not taking much effort. That is yoga. Only through the discipline it happens. That's why Anushasana, the discipline comes. Now let us see what is this chitta vritti. The mental modifications, the activity of the mind, all those things will come here. Anything that we are emotionally connected. I am sad, I am happy, I am angry, whatever you want to see, emotionally connected is because of the mental modification, mental activity. Remove that mental activity, you can be neither happy nor sad, neither angry nor peaceful, nothing would be there. This is the self. When you stop this mental modifications, the mind business is on thinking. It has to think, there is no other way. But the connecting ourselves with the thinking, it's called association, I and mine. Then comes the emotion. How to stop thinking? You cannot stop. The other one what we can do is what comes later on. You have to go beyond the mind. It is in the mind. The thinking is in the mind. The thoughts are in the mind. I am neither angry nor peaceful. I am neither sad nor happy. That is going beyond, actually speaking, stopping of the association of the thoughts with the self. The third sutra explains what happens once you do that. When you stop the association, what happens? Without association, the person can see his own nature. Tada drashtu That drashta, drishya comes from there. What we call the one who has seen that, the essential nature he will know. And he will be established in that essential nature. Now we need to understand what is this essential nature. Is there other nature than essential nature? Then we have the explanation given as there are two types of definitions. One is the definition by accidents. When you define a person, you can define a person by the accidents, like let us say Jagadish is defined as Jagadish with the name, that's an accident. Maybe with the form, what we call short or tall. Maybe with the appearance, bald head or full hair, whatever it is. Maybe with the intellect, intelligent or non-intelligent. All these things are accidents. Essentially, what is a person? Others do not know. Only the person who has gone through his mental modifications and has gone beyond the mental modifications can look at himself. He will be established in that what we call essential nature. Not the phenomena, but the noumena according to Kant's what we call the terminologies. Once we have come there, you can see that what is phenomena, what is noumena, the understanding of it. We have got egotism. There is again a little bit of understanding what is egotism and what is egoism. Little difference, but we are not going deeper into that. Egotism, understanding T there. T means talk. I talk about myself all the time. Wherever there is a possibility, I will keep that I there. I did this, I did that, I am like that, I am all that I come. That's egotism. Talking of the self. Egoism is the consideration of oneself as the superior to the others. This too is actually perversion of a spiritual being, because spiritually speaking, removing that mind and body association, we are all the same. Now there is an ambition also. Ambition, extra. We are talking about the phenomena of self, the outer, the non-self as such. That is, ambition comes. I want to be, somebody, to be known, to have more money, to have more, whatever it is, that ambition that we have. This is a phenomenon which is an inversion of the spiritual power. That is what noumena is. Then we have got the passions of the body, passions of the mind, not the bike passion, but the passions that we have. The attachments to the things, to the persons. This is a distortion of the universal love. The mortality of the body-mind is a limitation of the immortality of the essential nature. This, to separate what is the phenomena, what is noumena. Now, all these false images need to be separated from us so that we can see the true identity of oneself. This is what, through the separation, the union happens. The fourth Sutra, the other things, vritti samulyam. Once you have not seen your essential nature, if you have not seen your essential nature, what happens is you will associate yourself with the mental modifications. I am this, I am that, all those things we have seen. This is where Dept can go as far like cogito ergo sum. That is, I associate myself with the thoughts. I am nothing but thoughts, reasoning mind. If I have, that is what I am. That is Dept's what we call definition. But that is not true. We need to go beyond. With this thoughts association, what you get is only misery, not the establishment of the self. Now you need to go beyond and find that pure joy, not with the thoughts. Thoughts also we get joy. That is not the pure joy. There's a flickering enjoyment that you get. That pure joy is actually replaced with the self-indulgence. I am getting some happiness with this indulgence. That comes, mind comes there, the phenomena comes there. Once you have not seen, you are not established in that essential nature of ourselves. Then comes all these indulgences of mind and self. What happens when we are indulgence in the mind and the body? The light of the pure vision, the spiritual joy, are replaced by the indulgence. That is the problem, because it is too difficult for us to do away with the passions of the body and the mind. It's not so easy. Take the words of Patanjali one way and experience yourself. It is not so easy to distance oneself from the body and mind. It is not at all, what do you call, easy job. That's why the discipline, Anushasana, comes. So they must be removed, separated, as if we are doing the cleaning of what we call the germs cleaning, for example. Even what we have said, Paul talking, the gold is being purified by the fire, something like that. But it is not with the violence. It is through the understanding. Not through the violence, but through understanding that there is phenomena within me, that which is actually speaking non-real. Now you need to understand the reality, non-reality, phenomena and noumena. Don't think phenomena, non-reality means my body is non-reality, it does not exist. No. It has nothing to do with the existence. Reality means that which is consistent, that which is almost like eternal, not that which has got changes now and momentary changes, not the momentariness, but the permanence. Now the spiritual persons, the powers that we have, that is, once we are established in ourselves, we have to take them out of these psychic meshes, what we call it. They have to be removed. The psychic things have to be removed in order to come to that spiritual powers. Then comes the fifth sutra. Fifth sutra is very interesting sutra, which says the modifications of the mind are fivefold and are painful and not painful. Klishta, aklishta, at the same time something like that it is given. How can one, what we call modification of the mind, be klishta, that is painful, and aklishta, not painful? It is not possible, but it is possible when we go on explaining it. When you say painful, when the vritti is involved in it, that is, you get associated with it, we say it, I am carried away by the thoughts, by the emotions. That is klishta, painful. When you get associated yourself with the thoughts, it becomes painful. Thought is a thought. Yes, I have got angry thoughts, maybe sad thoughts, maybe happy thoughts, but I don't get associated with that thought. Then it becomes what we call the non-painful. That is not joyful, it is non-painful, it's a neutral. And this association is what we are supposed to be careful. We become emotional when we associate ourselves with that body. Without association, without that ego, then it is not painful. We come to the last sutra. Now you say, what are those chitta vrittis that we have talked about, that we are not supposed to be associated with? Say right knowledge, wrong knowledge, then we have fantasy, imagination, sleep and memory. These are all chitta vrittis. So we need to understand them, which are separate from the self. All the 8-limbed yoga that Patanjali is going to propose after this is in order to find these 5 chitta vrittis and separate them in order to realize, find out, discover that self, so that we can be established in that self and experience the joy which is not momentary but which is eternal. We go to the conclusion. We have started with the surprise commentary by Bhoja. That has now come to conclusion. It is not separation but union, but not union but separation. Separation and union. This is the play with the words. That we have separation is justified as separating the mind from that which is beyond the mind. So we need to separate them. And the apparent from the real. So real is there, apparent is there, we need to separate these two. Then you see the discovery of the self. Thus, the first 6 Yoga Sutras lead a person to the subject matter, that is to find or realize the self by separating the non-self. With this, I conclude the talk. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. Now is the time for any questions or doubts.
There is
Father, congratulations for your beautiful presentation. I find the last part of your topic is very interesting, associating oneself with thought. So, my first question is, do you consider this like contemplation, meditation, reflection, as part of the thought? Because it involves, your thinking and...
Thank you. Thank you, Simon. It's a kind of, what Simon is saying, can we do it a part of our meditation, reflection? Let me bring to your notice, I must have said here and there in the classes also I must have said, with regard to the Ignatian contemplation. What he talks something like, there is a kind of exercise that he gives. The particular examination of conscience, that you realize something is wrong with you, maybe some habit, some bad thought, whatever it is, that you want to do away with. How to do away with it? The particular examination of conscience is because towards that. I take example, let us say drinking habits. A person has got a drinking habit, wants to get out of it. How to get out of it? It is not drinking like once in a blue moon parties are there, okay, you take a sip. That is different. Drinking habit as such, without which you cannot live a day. What St. Ignatius of Loyola proposes is, you be in one place, and when the urge comes, that I want to drink now, the urge has come, note it down. Don't follow the urge. Urge means simply thought has come. Now it is better to have it back. Thought has come. That's what urge is. Now note it down. But don't follow the thought. Now you are actually controlling yourself, avoiding going out to have a drink. And observe again when the second time the urge comes. In a day, supposing every day a person drinks, one day he sits down with this will that let me examine myself. This I found something bad. It is not that others said it is bad. That one has to find oneself. It is bad. Then comes to that consciousness. Then takes down. The urges will begin reducing the next day onwards. The first day, 10 times or 20 times, the urge has come. The next day it becomes more than half, less than half. And it reduces as days go by. What is Ignatius of Loyola giving is a disassociation of you getting identified with your thoughts. The thought came, I want to drink now. You identify with the thought and go out to drink. Now disassociate yourself with the thought and say it's a thought, I will not follow the thought. This comes under Ignatian contemplation. Very much for our reflection, for our prayer. Simon, thank you.
One last question, if there is any.
How this cell is connected to different kosha, like Annamaya kosha, Pranamaya kosha.
I understand. Okay. Koshas also, yoga gives just a reference to kosha. But actually koshas, the full explanation of the koshas are given in some Upanishad called Taittiriya Upanishad. Now what happens in Taittiriya Upanishad is, koshas are explained like a human person is not simply one person, but there are 5 layers of personality. These layers are called as koshas. Talks like Annamaya kosha, that which is the body, the gross body, outer body. Then we have got Pranamaya kosha, that which gives life to the body. Then we have got Jnanamaya kosha, that which has knowledge body. Then Vijnanamaya kosha, the discriminative knowledge. At the end comes the 5th one is Anandamaya kosha. Kosha which is eternally joyful. According to that Taittiriya Upanishad, that would be the self. You can discover self by removing these koshas. That is actually different way of separating altogether. Looks like similar. Yoga also says separation. Separate the phenomena and find out the noumena. Here Taittiriya Upanishad also says phenomena is these 5 koshas, 4 koshas, remove them. Come to the last one, which is essential, Anandamaya kosha. Father, thank you.
Thank you, Father. Let's give one more note.
No, this of my question is in general about Indian philosophy as such. All those systems, all this part of it, but it leads me to confusion. Of course, overall, in all these systems, question arises about self, non-self, I, Brahman, etc. Now, what is the common aim of Indian philosophy? It is integrity or separate. I, self, and the other, I and the Brahman. Now, what is the actual meaning of yoga? It is uniting them. Of course, you very much emphasize on one commentator and you are separating it. What self and the other, non-self. Though what is the main aim of all these systems? It's confusing. Are they integrating or are they celebrating? What is the essence of aim of these systems?
Thank you. This is an interesting question because the meaning of yoga as uniting, but one commentator said separation, and we are going on talking with that separation. That's only in the beginning I brought it how union and separation are one and the same. The conclusion is that it is not only Bhoja, one commentator, there is another, 2 other I forget the name, another one is Vyasa. Both of them, all three of them actually say this way. That is, you need to understand what is phenomena and what is noumena, what is apparent, what they use is what is self and what is non-self. Now, separation is in understanding only. I understand I am not the body. The body, when I said, Dr. Chandrasekhar was talking about, when I said my chashma, my spectacles, which means I am distancing myself from the spectacles. It is not me. The same way when you say my body, you are not the body. Only thing is it is somehow or other integrated to that self. Now, coming to the point at hand, separation, union. Why the commentators, especially the classical commentators, gave this comment as a separation in the beginning? This is not the end. The conclusion is union. What they conclude is union. But beginning they start with the separation. The science of separation. You start separating that I am not the body, I am not the mind, I am not the thoughts, I am not the feelings, I am not the emotions. This is what you are separating. At the end we come to one conclusion, then what am I or who am I? At the end the question comes. There comes the unity of I am beyond this. Now, have you taken away this body? Have you taken away the mind? Have you taken away the thoughts, feelings? This is what Father's question is. We cannot take it away. This is actually integration. I understand I have the thoughts. I understand I am getting associated with it. Because of that, I have the emotions and feelings, whether good or bad, both of them are going to lead me to difficulties. What they call it samsara, the misery. Because if I find happiness in one thing today, and I get associated with that happiness, tomorrow I seek the same happiness. This is what we call the misery. And that we need to separate. Once we separate that, you understand what the real joy is. Thank you, Father.
Thank you, Father Jagdish, for the informative session on self, clarifying all the difficult doubts. Now I request Father Satya to felicitate Father Jagdish. Dear all, we now have come to the end of today's seminar. I am sure all have benefited in one or the other way. Indeed, the day was beautiful, sessions were insightful, interactions were delightful, resource persons were knowledgeful, everything was full and full. Therefore, to be grateful for all that has been, may I now invite Father Vinod Soren, Assistant Professor, Departmental College, Satya Nilayam, whose heart is now wordsful to propose the word of thanks.
Please bear with me for taking away some amount of your time, but this is an important exercise. We've come to the end of a very meaningful and extremely engaging academic exercise, namely the Departmental Seminar on Discovering Self, Multidimensional Perspectives. I, on behalf of the Department of Philosophy, Loyola College, Chennai, and the Faculty of Philosophy, Satya Nilayam, Chennai, take this opportunity to extend our sincere and heartfelt thanks to some of the significant dignitaries, officials, and special task force teams, without whose contribution this enterprising venture would not be as successful as it has been. At the outset, I must admit that it has indeed been a great seminar with a very well chosen and relevant theme, meticulously planned, well coordinated, well anchored, well delivered, well reciprocated, intellectually engaging, thought-provoking, insightful, pulsating, and overall a very well orchestrated academic exercise. We are immensely grateful to God, grateful to each other. We're grateful to the Almighty for being faithful and benevolent to us. It is the Divine, the author of our life, who ordained and made it possible that we're all here despite the perils of the pandemic and the suffering around us. We are in very safe custody right now, but our deepest thoughts and prayers are with those who are still suffering the menace of this virus. Let me then now move on to thanking some of the significant personalities, dignitaries, and officials who add depth and value to what has already been an intellectually engaging and soul-saturating exercise for us all. Our sincere thanks and a deep sense of gratitude to Reverend Dr. Thomas Unearthing, the principal of Loyola College and our principal too, for gracing the occasion, blessing us with his indispensable presence and delivering a very inspiring felicitation speech. In fact, he gave us his own perspective of uncovering rather than discovering self, setting out the right template for our academic life, both of learning and teaching. Despite his busy schedule and his responsibilities as principal of Loyola College, he was able to make it, though he is not here. We are immensely grateful to him for his time and inspiring message. A round of applause to those who he is not here. Many thanks also to Dr. Father Boniface Panna, SJ, our Rector, Satya Nilayam, Departmental College, for your constant support, guidance, and wonderful felicitation address you gave this morning, rightly mentioning the key players involved in organizing and coordinating this great event, setting up a good platform for much greater discussion and dialogue to follow. Thank you very much indeed. Many congratulations and a very special word of appreciation, gratitude to Reverend Dr. Father Francis Xavier, Rector of Loyola College, for his absolutely brilliant exhortation on the theme, Discovering Self from Scientific Perspective. His exhortation encapsulated the key features of the very discourse of self, which marches on two streams, physiological and social, further consolidated by physical, mental, and spiritual conception of the self, setting up a great platform for engaging interaction, discussion, dialogue of high quality and distinction. Again, he's not here with us. Let's give him the round of applause. Thank you. To all the four speakers of the day, to begin with the Guru Shishya duo of Dr. V. Chandrasekhar, the Associate Professor Vivekananda College, and Dr. Jagdish Murala, our own dear Father Professor. Both of them spoke from the perspective of yoga, philosophy. However, the focus was different. Many congratulations and thank you very much for very well presented and well researched presentation on the theme that we dealt with. Thank you very much. Round of applause to them. And not to forget the two young, promising, dynamic, and hugely talented professors, Father Francis, Father Martin, and Father Lindsay Lobo, who showcase a great sense of scholarship, learning, knowledge, expertise, and speaking prowess making good use of the platform of this magnitude for the first time and making an immediate impact. Thank you very much and many congratulations. To Reverend Father Dr. Lawrence Fernandez, the head of the Department of Philosophy, Loyola College, and the Principal Secretary College, Satya Nilayam, our appreciation and gratitude to you for the welcome address you accorded to this August Assembly, and also for inspiring the very idea of this department seminar, making sure that this seminar went ahead against all odds. Many congratulations and thank you very much. Now to the man of the moment, the mastermind, the chief architect and the convener of this department seminar, Dr. Jagadish Murala, who also gave the dynamics of the seminar right at the beginning. Many congratulations for coordinating the seminar, working in tandem with the faculty, the resource persons, dignitaries and the coordinating team, ensuring that we have enough resources to conduct this great academic event. Thank you very much indeed for your leadership and enormously painstaking effort. Thank you. Last but not the least, there's so many people to name. In case I forget, please do excuse me. To our anchor person, the MC, Scholastic Rashna. Many congratulations. You did a fabulous job of comparing every session with efficiency and a touch of professionalism. Thank you very much, Rashna. Sincere and heartfelt thanks to Father Francis de Souza, our registrar and treasurer. We rely heavily on him for our financial needs. Thank you very much. To Father Minister, the administrator and the one who looks after temple needs and his team, his kitchen supporting staff. The fruits of the hard work possibly will be on display in the cafeteria very soon. To Satya Nilayam Choir, which led us into prayer. To the ushers, to the academic support staff, and to the team of students who chipped in with their invaluable helps getting this set ready on time for the seminar to commence. Many thanks once again to all the staff and students for your vibrant, dynamic and active interventions. Overall, it has been a collective learning effort, and each one contributed their mind to make this seminar a huge success. Many thanks and many congratulations to one another. Thank you.
Adding to the list of fools, thank you Father Vinod. Your speech was wonderful. And now I request Father Boniface, Father Lawrence and Father Vinod to come forward, and I request the appointed brothers to felicitate our judges.